Major hurricane hitting Texas. There are still headlines this morning. They are political, coming out of the White House. And yet another member of the West Wing staff is gone. NBC News' Kelly O'Donnell joins me now. Kelly, I just can't, I mean, I know it sounds like a broken record, but it happened on a Friday night in summer, normally a time when, I'm a business journalist, I'm an economic journalist. If a company tried that, they would get called out for trying to bury the news by doing it on a Friday night. But this was the White House, and there was a Category 4 storm hitting America, and the White House came out with relatively important news last night.
That's true, Allie, and I think that it has become sort of a Washington expectation that on the Friday of especially holiday weekends, we're all on pins and needles at 4 or 5, 6 o'clock thinking there's going to be this news dump, as it's been called. Here at the Trump White House, a lot of that. Fridays have been eventful here, and this week was no different. We had a couple of key things happening. On the personnel front, Sebastian Gorka is out. He had been part of the national security apparatus here advising the president, although we didn't ever really have a sense of his specific portfolio. He comes from the far conservative right, the nationalist wing, sort of in the orbit of Steve Bannon, the chief strategist, who just a week ago was also pushed out. This is a realignment by Chief of Staff John Kelly on the staff, and so that's big news. Expected that Gorka would not survive if Bannon was gone, but still very notable. Then you have the pardon of Sheriff Joe Arpaio of Arizona. This is the kind of thing that stands out. It's the first time the president's using his authority to pardon. It did not go through the normal channels of a review at the Department of Justice, and it comes just a few days after the president was himself in Arizona with a rally crowd, not a White House event, a campaign event. So he forecast that he was going to do this, and he did. And a glowing letter from President Trump in his announcement about the pardon, saying that Arpaio is worthy of a presidential pardon. His critics would say that he has long abused the rights of undocumented immigrants, that he's used racial profiling in his border patrols. He has been a get-tough hardliner on immigration for such a long time. He was really the face of that movement before Donald Trump ever contemplated politics. So he's now 85, and so Arpaio's pardon is something that we felt was coming, but boy, it hit like a thunderclap last night.
So back to Sebastian Gorka. It is a question a lot of people had. What was his role? He was a deputy advisor to the president. He was supposed to specialize in terrorism. When we had asked for somebody, this is the world you live in, but when Stephanie Rula and I had asked to interview somebody the White House, they gave us Sebastian Gorka. Didn't sort of make a lot of sense given what Stephanie and I specialize in. And it was right after that mosque bombing in Minnesota, in Bloomington, Minnesota. And we'd never heard this before. There are all sorts of theories about why people bomb or threaten religious structures. And his idea was that it might be an inside job or might be somebody from the left trying to turn people against the right. It becomes very difficult when the White House puts people out there to be, on the media, in the media, which seemed to have been Sebastian Gorka's main job, and they say things like that, and people like us are put in a position to have to challenge them on ludicrous statements.
That really was the role that we saw him in, and his comments have long been incendiary. He's able to hit hot buttons that riles up some of the president's base, and certainly he's a confident television speaker, and so it seemed that was the lane he was in this White House. He had a deputy assistant to the president, so that's not the most senior staff, but he became well known in conservative circles for being outspoken, which is an understatement, and he would be that person put out on television as a surrogate, as we use that term, for the White House. And so in a John Kelly world, that is not the kind of structure that he wants in this White House, and so it was expected that he would be out. There's two stories on this. Gorka says he resigned, and he published a kind of a lengthy resignation letter with, again, sharp-tongued sort of criticism of this White House. The White House doesn't always do this, especially in personnel matters. A senior White House official said he did not resign, but he is no longer at the White House.
Right,
so
it was really
the implication,
did he
was
resign?
fired.
Did he not resign? Was his security clearance revoked? We've heard a lot of stories since last night, but I just want to assure our viewers, and the reason I'm talking to you, Kelly, is that you're there. It's a We work all the time. There's no amount of nonsense you can throw our way at any time, including if there is a Category 4 hurricane that is going to prevent us from covering all the news all the time. That's what we do. That's what you do, Kelly.